Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the very first Hampshire County Council Driver Skills 60 Plus virtual open day. We hope you really enjoyed today's session and that it will give you lots of information about the current Driver Skills 60 Plus presentation. Just a few things to let people know about what's going on. Just to let you know, this session is being recorded, and one of the reasons for that, for those who haven't been able to book today, we will allow people to be able to watch it on the internet through the driver skill page in the Older Drivers Forum. We also won't let anybody be able to speak or actually raise their hands, but what we do ask is if you do have any questions, then please use the question and answer box, which is at the bottom of your screen or somewhere found on your screen. For those who have hard of hearing who actually want to see subtitles, then you will see on the bottom of your screen there be a little bit called live transcript. On that allows you to be able to basically click on that, and if you're not already seeing subtitles, it will allow you to be able to turn them off, or you can actually make them bigger or smaller depending on what you wish to do. So that's available for you to see. Other things that we'll ask you to do is that we will have a presentation, and at the end of the presentation we'll play you a small film, and then we'll bring all the panelists back again to answer your questions. So any questions and answers you have, I will collate during the session and then ask the panel at the end. So keep asking your questions as we're going along. And also, if anybody's interested and thinks, you know what, I would like to book a Driver Skills 60 Plus and give my details, then please put your details in the Q&A section. Give us your email address or maybe a contact telephone number, and Lindsay, who's monitoring it, will take down those details and they will be in contact with you at a later date. So those are the real main bits, just to let you know. First things before we really get going, we always want to know who's in our audience today. So it's always good for us to have a bit of a poll session. So if anybody's done this before, what I will do is just going to launch a poll up onto your screens now. And basically, this will just ask you what age group do you fit into. So if you just like to click against which age group you fit into, that would be fantastic. Then that gives me an idea of the age and type of audience we have with us today. I'll just let that carry on. A few more people to keep voting for us, please. Give you a little bit more longer. I can actually see how many people are voting, so it just gives me that time period of how long it takes. Okay. Most of you have done it now. A few more having a go. Rightio, I'm just going to end that poll there, so you should be able to see. So, and I'll share those results with you. So you can actually see our target audience for Driver Skills 60 Plus is 60 plus. And actually, all of you are of that age group. So that's fantastic. So well done for that. The other thing that we're going to do is just ask one more little question, and this is a little bit about you really. And what I want to know is, just so we have so we can gauge our audience with us today, if you could just tell us a little bit. Now this is a multi-choice, so you can select different ones that you want. You can select more than one if it's necessary. I see the vast majority of people are telling me that they're retired, which we would expect. Just having a little bit going on there. Few more people voting for us. It's really useful that you do this for us because it allows us to sometimes steer the presentation to the needs of the individuals that we're talking to. Rightio, nearly near the end there. Looks like everybody's keen about voting on this one, which is great. Okay, so I'll just end the poll there and I'll share the results with you there. And as you can see, 94% of you are retired, 2% are part-time employed, and 71% of you are actually drive private mileage only, and 4% have a driving qualification. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So what I'm going to do now is pass on to our first presentation today. We're going to have a presentation by Graham Mylward. He's the Senior Road Safety Officer for Hampshire County Council, and he actually runs the Driver Skills 60 Plus scheme. Followed by that, we will have one of the assessors, Jane Holt, who will be able to talk to you and give you some input about what actually happens in an assessment. And then I said I would play a little video just all about, so it's actually a video of somebody undertaking an assessment, and then we'll drop into our Q&A session with the panelists. So Graham, if you'd like to join us, please, that would be great.
Good morning. Okay, I'll make a start, Rob. Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to get the screen up. Won't be a second, and then we'll get the presentation rolling. There we go. Okay. So as Rob said, my job in the road safety education team is to look after the driver training, and the driver skill scheme 60 plus without a doubt takes most of my time and is my main interest. You'll see I'm trying to demonstrate on the next few slides my passion for this scheme, because I've run it for 12 years now, and you get a really good satisfaction from helping people. Not only just hints and tips for people that are already fairly good drivers and sort of helping them, but people at the real sharp end of driving, where they're trying to manage those last few weeks or months of their driving careers, and we try and keep them going as long as we can, but check that they're safe. We work with families, medical professionals, etc. And I've spent many hours on the phone over the last few years. In that time, I've also built up a really good understanding, I think, of more mature drivers, let's say, and their needs, and tried to build that into the scheme, which is forever changing, really. So you'll see a few pictures of me to demonstrate that sort of passion. First one on the screen there is me at a national conference. I was invited onto the question panel. So Hampshire is well represented nationally with the help of Rob and the Older Drivers Forum, but also our scheme. We get onto national events like that. The driver skills scheme 60 plus itself is, I mentioned, about advice on the phone, by email. Also, if we can't help somebody, we know of other organizations which can, so we can signpost. When we were able to, we did workshops and presentations, and these were just going out to the public and talking to a room full of people. And of course, that's been overtaken by the online stuff at the moment, which we've enjoyed doing, and actually it opens up larger audiences often. So I think even if we go back to the workshops, which I'm sure we will still carry on doing these online sessions, because they seem quite popular. And the big thing for us is the practical driving appraisals, which we run. They're from people's own home and in their own cars, but I'm not going to say too much because Jane's going to explain exactly what happens on there. And the other thing before I move on, I'm not going to make any excuses. This is a fairly hard sell in terms of trying to encourage people to do our driving appraisals, not because we want to take people's money or make money out of it. It's a subsidized scheme. It's for road safety purposes, but because we see a real benefit in any driver, however good they are, to just have a little refresher update every now and again, and we may be able to really help. So I better put just the price up. I haven't mentioned that. It is £45 for 90 minutes of professional guidance. And for some people that would be quite a lot, but for many that's quite affordable. And if you compare that with many other professions such as plumbers, certainly lawyers, dentists, that type of thing, I think that's very good value for money, considering that some of the information you get potentially in years to come could be life-saving. It certainly could be save you from unnecessary collisions and accidents. Now you can see there, I did say there's a few pictures of me. We have a team of assessors which I sort of manage, and whenever interesting clients come along, it's normally me that hogs the limelight, and I'm sure you recognize the top two people there. I got a smile on my face. I'm quite relaxed in their company as a passenger. At the bottom picture, I'm looking a little bit nervous with Santa Claus, so I'm not quite remember what his driving was like, but we get involved with all sorts of different things. And of course, these pictures were taken for a reason. We've been involved with, we've made 3 BBC videos now, and one of them is on our website under the driver skills scheme section. We get people phoning us that just want confidence builders. So this may be, I think Jane's going to talk about this later, but maybe somebody who's been involved with an accident or hasn't driven for many years for whatever reason and just want to build their competencies up. We're sometimes contacted by the police actually, who ask if we can help because somebody has had an accident and or an incident, and the police want them to do just a general appraisal of their driving rather than taking the matter any further. So we've done that on several occasions. Many of our clients are people who have got a real keen interest in driving, just like yourselves. And we strongly believe that we can really help for those as well. But as I mentioned earlier, some people are at the real sharp end of driving, and I will talk about that in just a moment. So before we proceed any further, it's worth thinking about what we perceive as a good driver. What do we mean as what encompasses being a good driver? Because we all have our own internal visions and views on that and perceptions based on our experience. It's interesting to note that whenever we ask, really large groups sometimes to rate themselves as drivers, almost across the board, the vast majority rate themselves well above average. So on a scale of 1 to 10, they tend to come out with 7, 8, 9s, and even 10s sometimes. The other thing is when we ask people what really annoys them about other drivers, which I guess enables them to rate themselves above average, they come up with the same list of things, such as people that are very poor at signaling at roundabouts, lane hoggers, people that fill gaps, people that follow too closely, and various things like this. But the strange thing is that pretty much every driver we speak to complains about the same things. So we have to ask the question, where are these drivers that do these things if we're all complaining about them? And of course, it's us. And the big thing with driving is particularly on local roads, which is where I understand the majority of collisions happen through complacency. So on local roads, familiar roads, on familiar cars, actually driving is very easy to many people. And therefore we can multitask, we can think about other things. And concentration is the biggest threat to us really in terms of a collision, because most accidents happen suddenly. We're not expecting them. If we were expecting them, we could have done something about them. So when we're not concentrating, we're very vulnerable. And of course, when we're not concentrating, this is probably when we don't signal at roundabouts, when we do hog the middle lane without being aware of who's behind us and so on. So we really have to think about our own driving, and our driving assessments can have a really good look at that side of things. What are our general habits? Are we in routines of doing things so that we can carry on with them during these autopilot times? So just go on to the next one. Yeah, so most people rate themselves way above average. Most people complain about the same list of things. Around 90% or more of collisions are deemed to be due to human error. So the human being is the weak point. And you will have noticed, I'm sure, that there's a push to get driverless cars on the roads, and there's a big fear of that when it comes in. And I'm certainly not looking forward to that. But one of the main reasons, in my view, they're trying to do that is because they're trying to cut down the huge number of deaths on the roads, fatalities on the roads. Worldwide, I understand there's somebody being killed on the roads every 30 seconds, from what I hear. And the statistics in UK show that 5 people will unfortunately lose their lives today if it's a standard day. And we just don't know when that's going to happen. Some of these people will be really good drivers, but they weren't quite prepared for the incident that they had to deal with. So you could define a good driver as being able to get from A to B safely on every journey without other road users noticing us necessarily. And if we've got a passenger, if they can comfortably relax on that journey, then generally we are a good driver. But that takes high levels of concentration. And again, on our assessments, we can give people tools about reading the road ahead, which you will have heard about on the advanced driving, reading the road ahead, little tools about never having a dull moment in driving, always being able to focus on what the next potential problem is, however simple looking the road is. Now on to the bit I said about towards the end of the road to what we call the road to driving retirement, people at the sharp end. And normally that is where a medical condition is involved, often a cognitive medical condition, which is not going to improve. With a physical medical condition, there are adaptions and all sorts of things which can be offered. But with a cognitive medical condition, it's a little bit more tricky. So it's a case of if it's a progressive illness, it's a case of not whether the person will have to stop driving, but when they will have to stop driving. And there's huge benefit for self-dependence and state of mind in keeping people driving if they are safe for as long as they can, by just managing the situation with family and friends. So if somebody is diagnosed with a cognitive impairment, let's say a dementia, no reason, according to all the guidance and everything we know, why they should have to immediately stop driving. In fact, the decision, I've heard from many people, the decision, if they are told to stop driving, it's even more of an impact than the diagnosis of the condition. So where do we turn to? Well, normally you would turn to the driving training sort of organizations. So using Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency approved driving instructors, which I'm one of those, all our assessors are one of those, and most organizations which assess people use what we call ADIs. We can also turn to the Institute of Advanced Motorists, or ROSPA. They use ADIs as well as retired police officers to assess. And although they're mainly known for the advanced tests, which are very good, well worth doing, they also have schemes which are catered for this audience, the more mature driver. The one drawback with this was two things to just point out with this is if somebody with a diagnosis of, say, dementia goes to one of these organizations across the country, these are available to try and get help, there's two things which can happen. One is the organization will say, well, sorry, we don't understand the condition and how it affects driving, so really we're not the right people. Or the other thing that can happen, which in some ways can be worse actually, is that the organization can agree to do an assessment, not fully understanding what's involved, and on a good day on quiet roads see a fairly safe drive and give false confidence. Whereas maybe you've got the family at home really concerned because they see the driver much more, so it doesn't match up. And of course, the driver then just holds up this certificate or this report to say, look, I was deemed as a good driver. That makes it much more the experts, if you like, to deal with. In Driver Skills Scheme 60 Plus, we're one of the very few organizations or local authorities which have actually taken people with these type of conditions over the years. We've been running for 20 years, and the early success of this scheme was largely built on, I believe, contact with lots of doctors in Hampshire. And it's one of the few schemes, or voluntary schemes, which actually can get to those people who need the help, the not so good drivers, because normally if there's a choice, people that know they have a problem with their driving will not get it looked at because they're afraid of the outcome. Whereas here, in connection with the doctors, we did that. We did come across a problem over the years, a few years ago actually, where we looked at some of our reports and we found some of the things I've just mentioned being a problem. So the recognized authority for driving assessments is the driving mobility centres, and there's a range of assessment centres dotted across the UK. And this is where the recommended assessments will take place, because they use very experienced driving assessors, very experienced occupational therapists that really understand driving with a medical condition. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as that, because for various reasons to do with not having their own car, not driving on the roads they sort of only want to drive on local roads, the waiting list, the cost, etc. For various reasons, I believe, from what I understand, only around about 10% or less of the people that are diagnosed with dementia and still driving actually go to see the mobility centres. So however good they are, we've got these huge number of other people that have nowhere to turn. So we've basically taken steps to cut out some of the weak points, develop the scheme, and now we're delivering these schemes where we can advise people and signpost them to driving mobility if we feel we can't deal with it. So we've helped many families like that. The Older Drivers Forum covers all these various different schemes, not only in Hampshire, but across the country. And it's worth remembering that fitness to drive is a legal decision, based either by the courts or the medical professionals. It's not for a driving assessor to say you can't hold a license anymore. It's fitness to drive is a legal decision. So how to book a driving appraisal? Lindsay in the background is able to take details of email addresses and phone numbers on the Q&A button, and we will contact you. If you don't want to do that and you do want to find out more, you can email road.safety@hants.gov.uk or phone us on 01962 846 100. Probably we prefer the email because it manages the situation a bit more. But if you need to phone, we can certainly happy to speak to you. There's also our website there as well, which will give information. So just a final few words. Managing the road to driving retirement. We remember this question: are we nearly there yet? Our kids used to ask us that on a long journey because they have no real perception of distance or time. And we used to sort of bat off the question with, oh yeah, it won't be much longer now. And in some ways, when we develop cognitive illnesses, the tables are turned, because we find that we don't have the insight to really recognize where the end of the journey is. And we then rely on our families, often our children, to guide us through that with the help of professionals. But for everybody that ages, every single one of us, we will experience a very gradual decline in our abilities to see, to think. And on that picture there, I'm sure many people can relate to this, that new technology, for example, young people can pick it up much more quickly because they process the information much more quickly. The young person is saying, just press that button there, just press this button here. And we're saying, oh, hold on, let's just wait, I just need to look at this and think about this for a while. And our brains just slow down. That's a natural part of aging. And of course, in driving, we take in the information through the eyes and it goes into our brain and we have to process that information. And it's not a perfect science. Even any age, it's not a perfect science. So we can see the wrong thing, we can make mistakes. And of course, the recommendation would be, if safe, and to always talk to your doctor. Try and do some gentle exercises to keep the joints subtle on a regular basis, because there's a link between the physical situation and good driving that I've seen. And I know if I've got a bad back, I don't feel such a good driver. I can't look at junctions so well. And I don't know if it's just distraction of that condition, of that situation, but I don't feel so safe. So on the seeing and thinking part, we've just very quick on this one. I'm not going to show the full demonstration, but we're working with Warwick University just to demonstrate limits of visual attention and what they call change blindness. So we're just going to see how people get on with this, and we're interested in any feedback, whether this is actually useful. First of all, a warning, there will be some slides flash up and go off the screen with about a second time difference. So if you are sensitive to flashing imagery, then it may be best to certainly look away for 3 or 4 minutes. So you're about to see several demonstrations in which you will see one picture for a brief amount of time, followed by the same picture where something has changed. Between each picture, there's a blank screen, which is designed to simulate an eye blink or eye movement. So looking at a junction one way or the other, where we've just lost sight of that picture for a few seconds, for a second or so. The pictures are on a loop and will be presented one after the other continuously for about 6 seconds. And then we'll ask whether you noticed the change between the two pictures. So first of all, just gonna do a demonstration to show you what to expect. There's 2 pictures there. Top left will be one, bottom right will be the other. And it's actually quite difficult when you're staring at this for me to see the difference, but it's the building in the background, the cream building. I'm trying to get my pointer there. It's that one. The next one is much more obvious when we circle it, is the sign. So it's that type of effect. So I'm going to start the demonstration and click through these with about a second duration. And then at the end of it, we'll just do a poll to see whether you noticed what was different on that. Okay, Rob, are you able to do that poll now? So we're asking what was missing? Was it a road sign, road marking, building, vehicle, pedestrian, or other? What was changed? Just give a few seconds for that to come up. Okay, have we got any results there, Rob? Yep, lovely. So the vehicle. So that fits in with what we found with other people noticing that vehicle, because of course that's what we're looking for. So that's great. Okay, so on to the next one. Oh yeah, sorry, there was the vehicle. I should have I'll show you that next time for longer. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, and the poll again, please, Rob. And the results, again, pretty good. 46% of you noticed the road markings. So that's an important thing when we're looking at the road, but that's actually better than I've seen in the past with other people. So that's very good. So let me just show you that this time rather than skip through it. There we go. So it's these road markings here have changed. The hatches have gone. Okay, so on with the final one. And again, the final poll, Rob. And then the results are coming up. Yeah, not so clear cut, this one. The result was actually, the answer was actually building. So the 5% who got that either very, very observant or it was chance. I'm sure you actually noticed that. But that's a much more difficult one. So let's just see that. The house has disappeared on the second picture. Now, it's understandable why people don't mention this. And again, that follows the trends we'd normally see. And it's got no real direct significance because, of course, when we're looking at a junction, we're looking for the road markings, we're looking for the vehicles, and these are what people spotted. But it's just meant to demonstrate that's how our vision works. They look at specific things. look at what we expect to see. And there's the reason they're looking into this is because we know that people, when they're coming out of junction, particularly if they rush their observation, quick look left, look right, and they're out, they miss things. They miss really important things, and often pulling out in front of motorcycles or cyclists. So it's really just going to say that we really have to focus on the environment and have a good look before we emerge from a junction, because we can make mistakes in what we notice. So we go on to the next one. And one of my favorite things, I don't know if you've seen this before, but there are 6 Fs in that. I'll just give you 10 seconds if you can identify 6 Fs. We're not going to ask you this one. Just give you a few seconds. Where are the 6 Fs? Okay, and bearing in mind, we don't have this long to look at a junction, but we got finished, files, of, scientific, and of. And the ofs, the 3 ofs there are sort of obvious words. They're joining words. So the brain doesn't really take that in and doesn't need to take notice of those, because we put the whole sentence together. And again, these ofs could be motorbikes, cyclists, that we don't really notice because we're not expecting to see them. So again, we need to have really good proper looks at every junction. And then finally, that sentence, which it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word appear. The only important thing is that the first and last letters be in the right place. And our brain, again, makes sense of that, because even though it's not what we see, and it's what we're understanding. Okay, so now on to Jane. Jane Holt is one of our very experienced assessors who's been with us. I think Jane will tell me if I'm wrong, we're around about 2012. And she covers the east of Hampshire. So my picture's in the way on my screen, but the bit which comes down from sort of Borden, right down Petersfield, Waterlooville, Havant, Gosport, Portsmouth, that sort of area. And I'll let her explain some of her experiences. But you may all remember your test day, very nerve-wracking, because at the end of it, there's a pass and fail, and we're very, very nervous. It's no matter how good the examiner is and friendly, they have a clipboard there and they have to be very formal. We actually design our assessments to take as many of those nerves away as we can and be user-friendly and put you at ease, and it's just to drive out. So over to Jane now. I will stop sharing and turn my camera off. And Jane, are you able to start your video now?
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. As Graham has said, yes, my name is Jane Holt and I'm one of the assessors for the 60 Plus Skills Scheme. So I'm going to just talk to you about what happens. So we arrive at your home, and the initial thing that we want to do is just check that your driving licence is all legal and in date and things like that. Check whether you need to wear corrective eyewear to drive. And then we'll do an eyesight check. So we'll ask you to read a number plate at the legal distance of 20 metres. Most of the time people are able to do that. If there's any difficulties there, we may have to get the tape measure out, measure it exactly and just see where we're at, and possibly refer you back to your optician. But hopefully you're getting your eyes tested regularly, once a year at least, and any other eye problems that you're getting checked out. So once we've sort of done the kind of legal bits, if you like, we'll start to just have a general chat about what it is that's brought you to us today, whether there are any particular goals or aspects of your driving that you want to work on or have looked at, or a particular junction or situation that you want some assistance with. We'll ask you about the range of movement that you have in your neck and see whether there's anything there that could potentially become an issue later on, and signpost you there if necessary. Whether you have any issues getting in and out of the vehicle, what your seating position is like, because there's a lot of people that don't perhaps realise the amount of things that can be adjusted on vehicles to make you not only feel more comfortable, but most importantly, that you're nice and safe and you can reach all the controls and everything properly. We'll also, during the chat, establish anything medical that may be going on, and that that we might need to address and make allowances or adaptations for. And then I'll just really ask you what probably your 3 most regular trips are. in your local area, so that we can start to agree a route together. We'll generally, to begin with, ask you to drive somewhere very local, maybe sort of 10 minutes or so away from where you live, where there's a car park the other end. So very often I get to go to visit a lot of Sainsbury's and Tesco's and local community centres, might be a bowling centre or a golf course, something like that that you go to. And during that initial drive, we're just going to sit quietly and just let you crack on how you normally would do. And we're just going to, really do a little assessment there of what your typical driving styles and habits are. And then when we arrive at your chosen venue, we'll stop the vehicle, turn the engine off, and we'll just have a chat about the drive so far and see whether there's any areas that we might want to develop during the second phase of the drive, which is a longer phase where we'll take in a whole different range of roads. So overall, we want to have tried to cover urban roads, rural roads, perhaps a bit of motorway and dual carriageway if that's what you're still driving on. But we want to make sure we don't put you in any situations, or you put yourself in situations that you're not normally in. This isn't about pushing you and challenging you. It's about assessing what you normally do. What's the norm for you? So on the development drive, it might be that we start to have conversations about things that are going on and just giving you little hints and tips on what to do when. Obviously, if that's okay to do on the move, we'll do it that way, or we might need to build in a couple more stops just to review things as we go along. But it's all very relaxed, very informal. Safety is the priority. And when we get back to your home after the drive, which is approximately an hour, then we will have a debrief and I will complete an assessment report that looks at your risk, whether it's low risk, medium risk, high risk, what you might need to do to lower the risk. And that's in lots and lots of different driving areas. We break everything right down so that you know exactly what needs to be addressed and what doesn't. And then we recommend that you perhaps come and see us again in the future. Some people come once a year, just like a little MOT on their driving. Some it might just be a one-off. It really depends. So I've got a few little examples of things that have happened and people that I've met over the years. Probably one of my most notable ones last year was a gentleman. He was 91 years of age. So, obviously on arrival there, you're thinking, oh, this could be interesting. Let's see how this goes. And he did an absolutely fantastic drive, low risk in all the areas that we assess. And he was formally trained by the Institute of Advanced Motorists. And I think just having that ongoing training throughout his driving career had really helped him to be able to stay safe for a lot longer. Another gentleman I saw, a former police officer, he wanted to be really challenged on his drive and perhaps do things he doesn't normally do. But he did say to me he was aware of a few concentration issues creeping in. And what we established quite soon and what he then agreed was that perhaps it is better to keep it simple, keep it local, try not to put yourself in situations that you don't need to, that aren't familiar, but also remember in your local area, as Graham said, you can let your guard down and, there might be a situation where you come to a junction every day, there's never anything there, so you don't perhaps look properly, and then on one occasion, something takes you by surprise, exactly in those pictures that Graham was showing you. Something might appear that's not normally there, and it can throw you. Another example of the sort of things we do, it's not always this way round, but in my experience it can be. I've had a few lady drivers who perhaps over the years have been the second driver, not driving as frequently as their husbands. And in one occasion the husband had become unwell and the wife needed to become the main driver, and she didn't have much confidence. But after taking her out for an hour and boosting her confidence, she realised, you know what, I can do this, I can be the main driver. So that was great for her. We also help people with change of vehicles. There's a lot of new technology in vehicles now, things like automatic wipers, automatic headlights, climate control, satellite navigation systems. So it could just be that someone simply wants to have a bit of a familiarization session on their new vehicle, and we help with things like that as well. And the seating position, as I said earlier, a lot of the time I will be getting people to just do slight adjustments with their seat for comfort, but most importantly for safety. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour and overview of what we do. So I really hope that I will get to meet some of you in person in the near future. And I'm just going to hand back to Rob now to proceed with the rest of the presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Jane. Thank you very much for that input. It's really fascinating actually to listen about those stories that Jane was saying. And actually, one of the things I didn't point out to yourselves, I am actually a retired police officer. Retired back in July 2019, and actually I was in the traffic department, so I was an advanced driver not only on motorbikes but also in cars as well. Now, I always have said to people since then is that yes, every year I got assessed for my driving year on year just to make sure I had my standards, but now I've retired, I'm not having that. So am I really still an advanced driver? Am I still a class 1 police driver? Well, I'm not, because I obviously still have a lot of those skills, but as time goes on, we all lose those skills and we get into bad habits. So without regular checkups on how we're getting on, sometimes we can lose our skills, and that's sometimes when hazards can occur and we become more risky to ourselves and others. So it's always good to think about doing a driving appraisal with an independent person just to help brush up on your skills. And that actually leads me on nicely, because what we're going to do is I'm just going to share a video with you. Some of you may have seen this. It's a video that appears on the Older Drivers Forum website under the Driver Skills 60+ scheme. And actually is one which actually was done on a TV celebrity. Many of you may know Bruce Parker. He actually lives in Hampshire. And actually the Driver Skills team took him out a few years back and actually carried out an appraisal on him. So we're just going to watch a short video on that particular scheme. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So let me just get that sorted. Hold on a second. And here we go. So
the Hampshire County Council's road safety team has been running the driver skills scheme 60+ for well over 10 years now. It's a voluntary scheme, and last year we carried out more than 500 driving appraisals. These are 90-minute driving appraisals, maximum of about an hour's driving. The specially trained and selected assessors visit the person's home, have a general chat about their driving patterns, what they want to gain from the appraisal, and generally agree which road types they're going to go on. And following a licence check and an eyesight check, they then go out in their own car. The driving assessor allows them to drive for 10 to 15 minutes, and then as a safe stop somewhere, does a debrief about what they've seen so far, and then maybe set some objectives up about how their current safety levels can be enhanced if that's necessary, or generally cover other road types on the remainder of the time. And then it's back to the home. They sit down and do a full debrief, and a comprehensive but confidential report is filled out with any necessary recommendations. And I stress the confidentiality of it. We don't pass that information on to anybody else. The aim of the appraisal is to keep people driving for as long as they are safely able to do so.
Okay, well, that was just a short film just to give a brief overview of what happens, following what Jane had explained to us. So what we're going to do is now have our Q&A section. So actually, if I could ask Jane, Graham and Lindsay to turn their videos on and sound, that would be great. Okay, well, you should see us all as a gallery now. I've got a few questions that I've got here. One person asks, how do you join a motorway when you cannot join as so many big trucks and so many things are coming in and not letting you to join the motorway? So they're probably good for Jane or Graham, really.
Well, shall I start and then Jane puts her opinion on that as well? The motorways there is a problem if there are too many close packed lorries without gaps between them as they tend to drive along. I think it's a much more of a problem on these dual carriageway with short slips, if I'm honest. Motorway slip roads are designed to normally quite long. And what we've found, and I've mentioned this on other webinars, that people sometimes have a tendency to do without really out of habit, is to try and join near the beginning of the motorway. Now, sometimes that's really useful, but what that does, it cuts down the amount of time for us to assess what the problem is, the two lorries, to either change speed. Sometimes we can accelerate to get in front of them. And it cuts down the amount of space and time we've got to do that. So the first thing I would say is, out of habit, is always stay to the left and aim to go towards the end of the slit road, not the very end maybe, but a long way down the slit road. But of course, once you've assessed things and you're perhaps catching a slower vehicle up by doing that, then obviously you will then change that plan and come out earlier, because that gives more time. The other thing which you can do, which I do, and I have to be honest, I've never had a problem on the motorway with that situation. I have on a dual carriageway with a shorter slip, is when you're coming down the slit road, try and view those lorries as early as possible. Not always possible, but even as far as going across around the roundabout, over the bridge, over the motorway before you join, you can glance down and say, there are two lorries there. I may end up trying to join next to them. So at least you're aware, and then you can look for them again and try and join at a different time from them, just by subtle changes of speed. The other thing to do is to, if safe, you have to have space in front of you. You cannot do this following a vehicle closely or going around a bend. But on these slit roads, they're normally straight. You can hold back from the vehicle in front. And if possible, it's not always possible, have a really good look into that blind spot. Maybe once or twice, really good look round, because if you can identify those lorries, then you have a much longer piece of road. You can accelerate and you can come out well in front of them, or you've got more room to slow down and join behind them. So you've got more time to think. Jane, have you got anything else to add on that?
No, I haven't. That's exactly what I would say. And it's often the case that sometimes the speed on the slip road isn't perhaps quite enough to match the speed of joining, so which you alluded to there. So yeah, it is about buying yourself time, isn't it? Time and space. And I tend to say to people, a lot of people like the analogy of kissing the parrot. Imagine you've got your parrot on your shoulder and you're just coming across just to check that blind spot, because obviously we don't want you looking right behind in case you lose sight of the road.
Yeah, and of course, that's a really good point, a really good example. If somebody's not quite sure about that, and they were to ask Jane or one of our assessors to take them on this slit road and sort of reenact this, you can't always make two lorries be there, of course, but reenact it just to show, because it sometimes just click, that little click. Oh yeah, if I do that, I probably won't have the problem. But it's difficult to explain on an environment like this, rather than it's much easier in the car. So that's a great example where we can help.
Yes, and actually, unfortunately, there are quite a few junctions, certainly in Hampshire, that we're aware of. Somebody's put on here that there's one on the A3 from A31 Hogsback, has a very short, I think that's just into Surrey, has a very short slip on. But the same point, I know there's one on the A34, which just under with the A303, you join the A303 from the A34, and it's the most tiniest slip road with the most difficult view to get on. And really, the only thing I can suggest to people on that is, perhaps if it's something that you're not comfortable is, find a different junction to join or find a different road. That's probably your best bet to do, because stats and research does show that as we get older, it does take us a little longer to see information and process it. Sometimes can take up to at 70 miles an hour, they say it takes 2 seconds or so, 2 extra car lengths for an older person to identify a hazard and react to it. So maybe that's just where we need to give ourselves more time. And
that's a really good point, Rob, because that junction, I know obviously no on the 303, and I will go out of my way to avoid that one because it is tricky. And if I can avoid it, I will. And I think that's sensible. It's
a difficult one. And just to let you know what we're doing on the Older Drivers Forum, I sit on a national task force called the Older Drivers Task Force, and we're about to put out another report in this year, September, and this is going to the government and the Department for Transport. And one of our recommendations is better design for people, really, at the end of the day, because unfortunately what we do get is a lot of the roads aren't designed for the aging population, and therefore the government and the highways department need to take this into consideration. So these are things that are going to happen. So Graham, this is probably one for you to mention about. Somebody mentioned about the flashing images one where you had them flip, flip, flip. And what they actually said is this wasn't really a reality of a real situation. I don't know if there's something you want to say.
Yeah, I will. And I probably misrepresented it a little bit. And it's the first time we've done that. And I need to explain that a little bit more. First thing to say is this is a thing they're trialing at Warwick University to demonstrate this change blindness thing. It's not about any age group or anything. It's across the board how our brains work. So that's what I was trying to get across. And actually, the answers we got on, I mean, you'll remember when we did the trial, Rob, the answers we got on from this group that's listening now were better than I've had with many other groups. So it was not about any particular incident. It's just a demonstration to say that how the brain works. And the fact is that most accidents happen at junctions. And we get this thing when accidents are recorded as, I think it's called looked but didn't see. And that clearly, to be honest, it's mainly attributable to young drivers in a hurry. And you'll all see them. They come up to a junction, look once, look twice, look three times if you're lucky, and then they're straight out within about a couple of seconds. Whereas more experienced drivers like ourselves will have a better look. But it was trying to say that there are still things, sometimes you can miss things, obvious, like we've all talked about. So that's really what it was meant to say. It's not reality, that flashing image thing, all the 6 Fs, but it's just to say how our brain processes information, really.
And I think one of the important factors is that when we get to a junction, one of the main really important things, as Graham's pointing out, is that we spend time, because quite often, certainly in areas that we know well, we will pull up to a junction and have a cursory look left and right without actually really spending time. And unfortunately, that's where the likes of something small like a cyclist or motorcyclist can drift into the background. And actually research shows that the place where the most collisions occur, certainly for the older generation, is turning right across a junction. That's where about 70% of all collisions involving older drivers occur. And maybe it's just because you're not spending enough time looking properly and reacting to what you're seeing. So this is why it's important, we're just highlighting this to yourselves, is about when you come up to a junction, spend plenty of time looking from it. Now on that, a gentleman said, Graham didn't mention the scape view effect, which helps some people. The eyes do not scan as some people imagine. If one scans around a room or landscape, your eyes jump from one object to another. So they do not see everything. You need to know what you are looking for. And basically, if you look out for what you're looking for, then you'll be able to react to it, which is exactly what we're saying. Is you need to spend much more time, be aware, and expect the unexpected. I mean, when I did my driving, they always said, time to react, give yourself time to react. So it's expect the unexpected, because there could be that cyclist, there could be many different things that will happen. And I mean, I dealt with one particular fatality, unfortunately, as a roads policing officer some years back, where there was a huge great truck across the road which was completely blocking the road. But actually, when you drove down that road, it looked completely clear. It looked like it was just a building in the distance. And it was only when you got right on top of it that you realized there was a truck across the road. And by that time, the driver hadn't enough time to react and unfortunately collided with the lorry. So, and it was really interesting when we took photos of it and asked people to see, what could they see? It was just fascinating in that point of view. Okay, let's have a look at some other questions then. I find that not signaling is a big issue. Also, what is the correct rule for roundabouts? Now, I know Graham in our previous webinars has done this through and through and through. So it might be good if you get confused to have a look at one of our previous webinars, which is on our Older Drivers Forum. And there's a page called webinars under the events and things. Have a look on there. We've got some of our previous ones, and Graham's gone into detail about roundabouts on that. So there's lots of questions on this. I find that traffic joining from the road on the right assume priority, even if their queue in their road is 40, 50 cars long. So I can be ready to enter a roundabout, but forced to wait for cars that are not even near the roundabout. But who but who just drives straight onto the ignoring the facts. So basically a little about who has priority at roundabouts, and sort of a quick précis for Graham and Jane really on roundabouts for us.
Yeah, shall I go first, Jane, and then you?
Mhm.
I believe I've had this question before, and I believe the person's referring to, I'm quite happy to be wrong here, the mini roundabouts or the smaller roundabouts, and particularly mini roundabouts where somebody's tearing in from the distance and you're waiting to go on and you think, oh, I can't dare do it now. And that's how that's driver's behavior, you know, and we have to, if by pulling across that giveaway line, we're likely to cause an accident or to make somebody sort of really slow down dramatically, cause a danger, then we just have to wait. On the larger roundabouts, of course, it's normally just the people on the roundabouts. You rarely have to wait for someone coming in. Jane, have you got anything on that, or even the signalling that was answered earlier?
Yeah, well, I think for me, one of the little phrases that I like to use, which a lot of people seem to relate to, is the early vision, early decision. So trying as early as you get a line of sight to that roundabout to start assessing. And again, as Rob was saying, as we get older, it does take us longer to make decisions. So therefore, the earlier we can start to prepare, the more chance we've got to choose our gap. And also, sometimes people get sort of caught by looking at the vehicles rather than looking for the gaps between the vehicles. So if you can learn to you know look at the gaps, also with the signalling, try not to overly rely just on a signal. Look at the wheels of the vehicle, which way are they pointing, what position is it in. Maybe if you can see through the windows, where's the driver looking, you can have all these other clues as to what people might be doing, rather than just always relying on an indicator signal. So those are the kind of tips I would be giving out. But again, if there's roundabouts that you just find are getting more and more stressful to handle, see if there is another route that you could use.
Yeah, and I think really we often have what people need to do is just, as we've said again, give themselves plenty of time to look for these different things, and also expect. I always, when we were trained as an advanced driver in the police, that expect people to do silly things really at the end of the day. So, and always give yourself, like I go back again, I said a minute ago, time to react. Expect these people. Is that person going to pull out on me? If I come here, will there be enough room? And actually, I've found many times that I've avoided collisions because I've read people. We've all been behind people before, and they're just looking a bit strange, maybe on a motorway, and you're thinking, you know what, I'm just going to back off a bit, allow them to do something, and then suddenly they will change lanes or will exit, and you're actually really pleased with yourself because you're thinking, you know what, I saw that coming. And I think that's just driving. That's about self-preservation for all of us.
Yeah, but Rob, one of the things which I pointed out on the video you referred to earlier was there is a massive advantage in, if you're moving towards a roundabout, in joining safely in a smaller gap than you would if you're completely stopped, because the time and the sort of everything it takes to get going from a complete stop is a bit longer. But also drivers on the roundabout can see you're moving and a bit more ready. Whereas if you're on a dead stop and you dart into a gap, they're not prepared. So Jane mentioned it. If you can view the roundabout early and time your approach to that white line so that however slowly you're still moving, if safe, of course, there's a major advantage there. And we can show people that on our assessments.
I think someone just wanted to clarify, just can we make what is the correct rule on that, you know, at a roundabout? Who has right of way?
Okay. Yeah, we give way to the right always. So always give way to the right. But I think part of the question was, what if they're actually not yet on the roundabout? Jay might be able to tell me what the exact wording in the highway code, but from a junction point of view, if somebody's not on the roundabout and it's a danger if you pull out, you simply have to give way to them.
Yeah, because you've got your give way line, haven't you? So the rule of priority is give way to the right. Really, if you can flow on without causing anyone else to change speed or direction, then you're okay. Sometimes we use a clock example and kind of have like a danger zone represented between 3 and 6 o'clock. Again, that's something probably best explained in a situation where we can draw a diagram and give people some help that way. But also it's about when you join the roundabout. I was out with somebody yesterday and he positively pulled on, but then we didn't continue the momentum. So suddenly what was a nice gap became quite a squeezed gap. And when we looked in our mirror, it looked like we were towing the person behind. So it just, once you're going, go and be positive. And yeah.
I think that leads us on nicely, actually, Jane, just for another question that someone's asked, actually. It says there appears to be a group of drivers whose comfort speed is 40 miles an hour. They stick to this speed regardless of what the road conditions are, and even in 30 mile per hour speed limits. Do you know what their rationale for this is, and what can we do sometimes? Because we can get very frustrated behind people, can't we? So, you know, why are people just sticking at the same speed?
It's one for you, Jane.
Well, I think it's easy, isn't it? If you just have a one size fits all, you haven't got to think. So clearly those people are unaware of the speed limit. They're probably unaware of what they're doing. They're probably on autopilot, potentially on roads they know really, really well. And I can totally relate to what that person's saying. At some point, they'll probably be seeing me on a speed awareness course. So that, you know, hopefully I might get to see some of you, but let's hope not. But yes, you know, I think the thing is there's so many different people on the roads, and particularly after lockdown, I've noticed there seems to be a much bigger element of the very fast, aggressive driving. And then of course we've got people who've been self-isolating for a year who haven't driven, and for them everything seems so much faster. And you know, that probably applies to quite a lot of you on here today, and it's going to take a while to get your confidence back and get your speed back. And in the meantime, we've got to deal with the people that were driving in lockdown with hardly anyone else on the road that have kind of had free rein. So it's just a balance. We've all, you know.
Yeah, I think Rob, we could break that question down into two parts in many ways. Clearly driving at 40 through a 30 mile an hour limit in many cases, well, it's not only illegal, but in many cases will be dangerous. So that's one thing. But the other thing is it's slightly different, because it's people that drive at 40 when it's safe to go faster on a national speed limit. And I think that comes down to perception, awareness, understanding, etc. Because there's a understandable argument that I should be able to drive at any speed I want, and it's the other person's fault if they get frustrated behind me, overtake dangerously. But the fact is, we know that stress is a major problem on the road. When people get stressed, they don't think clearly. You know, we end up in road rage and all sorts of things if we're not careful. And one of the stress causes, if you like, is getting stuck behind a vehicle that is perceivably going much slower than they could be, and we can't overtake. So eventually that stress can end up, and I've seen this happen before, can end up on a dangerous overtake, and the poor innocent person coming in the other direction around the corner that is then killed, or the family or whatever, is caused by the driver that did the dangerous overtake. But if we come back a little bit, they overtook because this person was driving slower than they could have been. So there is I think we do need to be aware of that, and what problems it causes other people, and what that can turn into.
Yeah, I think you're right. So looking at cars and visibility and what we're doing, someone's asked, do you recommend any particular car as providing the best all-round visibility?
Jane, do you know any?
Well, I think the bigger the windows, the better. The squarer the car, and of course all the newer cars are going quite aerodynamic. The biggest issue I think with a lot of the newer cars is the A pillars at the front. I've got a Nissan Leaf and I've got a massive blind spot. My A pillars are so wide that I really do have to lean round when I come up to junctions. Honda Jazz, I expect quite a few of you might even be Honda owners. They are a very good vehicle for all-round vision, because the windows are big and low. But really it's about your seat position. Make sure if you're thinking of changing, that whatever vehicle you get in, you take time in the showroom or wherever it is you are to make sure you can get that seat position perfect for you, and that you've got the best visibility that you can. to do our job as driving instructors, I've sat in so many cars to make sure not only is it right for me, but when I'm sat in the passenger seat, is it okay for that job? So it really is just looking at as many different ones as you can, which now with what's happened with restrictions being eased, you should be able to do that if you're thinking of changing.
Yeah, I think that's the sum up really. Different cars are different for different people. So it's really important that, you know, us recommending a certain type of car may be good for one type of person, but not for another. So it's really important you go and try a variation of cars and see what affects with you and what visibility you get with those. Right, another question is coming up. Parking in car parks. Do you think it would be a good idea that reversing into parking space is far better than reversing forwards in?
Yeah, in many ways, because when you reverse into a car parking space, you have a secure area behind you, as long as nobody's going to open the doors on the two cars you're driving between. You have a secure area behind you, which doesn't change, is unlikely to change very quickly. So once you've had a really good look there, during the time of your reverse, you still, of course, have to keep looking. That is sort of a safer place to work, to reverse into. And of course, then when this big van parks next to you and you've got to come out again, it's safer to drive out forward. However, not everybody's comfortable for various reasons into reversing into space. And I can sympathize with that. And also you get your shopping in the boot, so it's easier sometimes when you've gone to do your supermarket shop to drive in. So I think the question is, if you can reverse in, there are advantages. But whatever you do, if you're reversing out, is bear in mind that a small child can get right behind in that blind spot. And you can't do what we see many, many people do. You can't do this safely, because one day it's going to be a problem, is get it into reverse, have a look round to the right side, start reversing, and as you're moving, look to the left side. You have to do all three mirrors, and if you can, look behind every single area. And I believe do it in a stop-start. And you have a little go back, you have a brief stop, another look, and because things change so often until it's very obvious to everybody else that you're going to come out. So it's about how you do it in a lot of ways. Yeah. Is that all right, Jane?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, and I think a lot of collisions that occur out on the roads happen in car parks, and a lot of it is people reversing out and not seeing pedestrians or small child behind. So yes, there are a lot of cars now fitted with cameras, but don't just rely on those cameras. They're a great facility to have, but they're perhaps one of those extra things, like Graham says, look at the mirrors, look at the camera, and look over your shoulder. So a lot to do really at the end of the day. But obviously, if you're concerned about these different things, always when I go shopping anyway, I end up finding the most remotest part in the car park to park. So I've got plenty of room around me anyway. And sometimes you can park and drive straight in through one and into the other, can't you? So you're ready to pull out the other side. So I always tend to do that. I know it's a little further to walk to get into the store, which for some people may be difficult, but actually that's a good opportunity and sometimes protects people opening the doors into your car as well. So what other things have we got here? We've got smart motorways. This is a question that comes up time and time again. It's obviously a contentious issue. It's been in the press time and time again about smart motorways. And actually people says it fills them with terror. And also what happens in a safe place if we break down. Is there any advice you can give about them? And, you know, I'm going to ask this question and you may not wish to answer it. Do you think they're safe or don't you think they're safe? So.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of changed my view slightly on smart motorways from when I was asked this before, because before I hadn't really had updated statistics on. I think there was a question about whether, because we know there are accidents on motorway hard shoulders. We know that, and people are killed on motorway hard shoulders. So in my mind, the question about it was whether it's producing more fatalities than on the old version, because it's different ones. But that's how they work in road safety. You know, we have to be impersonal a little bit like that. It doesn't sound very fair, but we have to. And it seems, from what I now understand, that yeah, they are producing more problems. They certainly make people fear driving on them. but it's a complicated subject. So I would probably say, no, I don't support them, certainly in their current form. If they're going to use them, they need far more sensors, far more control about the lanes, and far more safe refuges. So I can't say I support them at the moment. But, you know, we said earlier that 90% of accidents are down to human error, and that doesn't help if somebody's in this situation on the motorway. But, and this doesn't change my view on smart motorways, but we all have a bit of a responsibility to keep our cars well maintained. And I can't remember, my car's quite old, and I can't remember ever breaking down on the motorway. Now, I'm not saying that won't happen. That can happen to me suddenly. And I hope it's not on a smart motorway. I hope it's on one with a hard shoulder. But we have to think about the whole thing. But no, I wouldn't support them at the moment in their current form, certainly.
Yeah, and I think that's a sensible thing, really, at the end of the day. I think what we have to bear in mind that the stats show that motorways are actually the safest roads than any road that we drive on, generally because we're all traveling in the same direction. Yes, people break down and issues occur. I know that certainly if you can make it to the hard shoulder, then that's great, or where the old hard shoulder should normally be, make it to that side. And when it's an opportunity, get out and get behind the barriers. But if you can't make it to the hard shoulder, the best thing to do is to stay in your vehicle, not try and get out and then run across the traffic. That's where we do have problems. I think there's something that's being looked at, and they're looking at creating more and more stops that people can have and safe places. And they're trying to make the technology that they pick up and put the red crosses up much quicker. Okay. So one question here is there any chance that the driver assessment for persons like the 60 plus is made more formal, so that at a certain age you have to renew it? Now, I can answer this a bit, really. I sit, like I said, on the National Task Force for Older Drivers, and we looked very much into formal. When you come to renew your license at 70, you have to undertake an assessment. We looked at that and what other countries are doing. And in fact, all the other countries that have implemented this as mandatory have actually seen an increase in the number of older person incidents. And what it has actually happened is that it's encouraged older people to stop driving, and actually then they get to become cyclists or pedestrians and become more vulnerable sometimes. So actually what it is about is it's where we all need to have regular checks on ourselves and take that responsibility. So when you get to 70, don't just tick the boxes to say I can read a number plate. Go along and get an eyesight test done by a proper optician. Don't just tick a box to say I'm fit to drive. Consider doing like this driver skill 60 plus appraisal to brush up on your skills. Like I said earlier, we all pick up bad habits, and actually it's not something, you know, anything that we do in life, we regularly need to practice it and get input from others to make sure that we remain good at it. I've always said as a policeman that a car is a lethal weapon, and it's a bit like with a gun. You would have regular training on it. You go to a shooting club and practice using it. And if you don't do that, then actually you're not proficient. And that, as drivers, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are fit, healthy, our eyesight's good, and we brush up on the skills. So another reason why I think people should do something. So I don't know if Jane or Graham have anything to add on that.
I think I would say that certainly the younger that people take the scheme, the sooner that means they can start to look at those little habits and things that could become problematic later. Because, you know, the older that we get, the harder it is to make changes. You know, during the development drive, we're looking to see whether the person can make those changes. And there is a correlation between the younger they are and how quickly they can change or adapt or tweak something than when they are a little bit older. So
it's probably worth mentioning or reminding everybody, Rob, that if you take the age group of certainly 60 to 75 or maybe a bit older, they're the safest drivers out there. But of course, as we enter the slightly older age and get above 80, all these gradual effects tend to take place. And if our habits, as we enter that older age group, aren't in the right place, as other parts of our thinking times and vision and things change, then these habits are going to have more of an effect. And we've got away with it. And, you know, I've got away with habits over the years, but before I started doing all the driver training business. And so we have to get the baseline driving correct before we enter this sort of time. And, you know, eventually I've sat with drivers who are 100 years old and they've been pretty much okay to get around to the shops and back, but wouldn't want to see. So it's very, very rare that people go on much after that. And we all stop sometime. And it's not, we don't want it to be a sudden stop. We want it to be a gradual, managed approach to the time. And all you can do really is just guide people and try and get all the habits in the right place and give them that chance to carry on. But I would say, just as a final thing on that, is almost across the board, the only people we recommend that they shouldn't be driving is, and Jane will, I'm sure, agree with this, is are people who have developed a medical condition that is not going to get any better, and actually just need managing to see if we can let them carry on for a bit longer along with the family and other people. I can't remember a time when we've just recommended to someone simply because they got unsafe habits that they don't need to drive. We find another solution. So yeah, but they are safest drivers around up to about 75 or 80.
Yeah, well, we all age differently, and there are drivers and people in their 40s who are no longer safe to drive, and equally other people in the latter years who, for reasons, are no longer safe to drive as well. And in fact, the oldest person to hold a driving license in the UK is 107 years of age. Whether they're driving, I don't know, because a lot of people, as we get into latter years, hold a driving license as a form of photo ID because it's the only thing that has your address and a photograph of you on it. So another question here, whilst recognizing that faculties do decline gradually as we get older, are there any schemes, exercises or organizations that one can join that can enable those faculties to remain okay or even improve?
I know there are schemes around which, for example, gentle fitness things are aimed at the person's capabilities, just to keep those sort of joints flexible and neck joints and things like that. I don't, is it Hampshire Connect, was that thing, Rob, which may?
Yeah, I think there's various different organizations. I think there is one
Yeah.
called Hampshire Connect that you can look up on the internet. And I think it's generally what I would always recommend to people is to think about doing some form of exercise. Don't we as we get older, we do become much more sedentary and we end up sitting in a chair. So even if it's just a little bit walking inside the house or walking up and down the garden, depending on your needs, but actually trying to keep things going, it's really important to do some basic exercises, even if it's sort of, you know, ask your GP what you can do if necessary. But it's about sort of finding out whether, you know, certainly when driving, we need to have a good view and we need to be able to look left and right. So good mobility in the neck is important. There are adaptations you can get, like longer mirrors and things like that, to help with people who have stiff necks, medical conditions, but it is really important to try and get those things to do. I think we're getting near the end of our talk today. So someone's just mentioned entering a motorway. Always good to keep up to 60 miles an hour. I think that's if it's possible, but adjust your speed down when more quickly. And so it's being sensible there. So I think it's really important that we just keep on top of that. Like I'd say to yourselves, if you're really interested in undertaking one of the driver skills 60 plus, then there's lots of information out there. At the end of this webinar, you'll go to a short survey, which we just ask you to complete. And then it will also direct you, take you to the driver skills 60 plus page on the Older Drivers Forum website. This webinar is being recorded, and I will download this and then upload it onto the website in the next couple of days so people can watch it if they want to, again, pick up on any information. There's a couple of videos on there. There's also, you'll receive an email in about a day's time, just hoping and thanking you attending, but it gives you details of how to book for the driver skills 60 plus. It says, are driving assessments available now, or because they had one back in 2018. I think what we've got to look at is, are you back to running them normally now with COVID, and what's happening with that?
Yeah, we're pretty much back to normal, other than the fact that we have to work to our risk assessment, which at the moment requires people to wear masks in the car if they're able to. We don't enter people's homes. We have various other things in place. We need assurance that they have no sort of, you know, COVID symptoms or anything like this. But Jane's been running them, for example, and I think that's gone pretty smoothly, Jane.
Yeah, Yeah, it has. And you know, if it's nice, if the weather's nice, we sort of chat outside the car. Obviously, if it's not, we would just get in and, as you say, with the masks, sanitize our hands, and you know, just take those precautions. I think pretty much probably everyone we meet will have had their second vaccination. I'm due mine soon, and possibly a lot of the assessors might have already had their second. So, you know, we're getting there. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're getting into it's been a strange year for us all. And I think
Yeah.
what we all need to be aware of is, with lack of mobility and lack of driving, we need to be aware of our skills. They will drop off. So, you know, think about getting back behind the wheel again, but take it carefully. Get out with someone else to sit in the car with you if necessary. Book a driving appraisal to go out and get your confidence back up again. Don't suddenly decide, you know what, we're now allowed to travel on holiday, and you haven't driven for a long time, and then set off for a big trip down to Devon or something. Think about building up your driving to get your confidence back into it again, getting someone else to help you with that. So I'd like to thank our panelists, Jane and Graham, very much, and Lindsay for working in the background, answering all about your requests and things like that. So thank you very much to you all. I'm going to end the webinar now. If there's any other further questions, then please send them through. I will direct them to Lindsay, Graham and Jane as necessary. And please do really think about undertaking a driver skill 60 plus. I can't say how important it is to keep brushing up on our skills, and how it's important to keep us safe for all of us on the road. So I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar, and thank you very much.